I have a film production company. I want to be the money guy to find money for films in the house and like social media. And I'd like to be an executive producer. I think TV news is like so maybe there will always be an audience for live or something, but I think social media is just like podcasts, cultural stuff, and then also so like what you said, like you call it tea, like something get the juice, like it's not tea, it's like it's not necessarily hard big journalism, it's more like it's like I want to make stuff that Zoomers that's I want to appeal to Zoomer audiences and millennials.
Oui, ce que je veux dire, c'est que quand j'étais à Los Angeles, j'ai vraiment eu été impliqué à Los Angeles depuis pas mal de temps avec la dernière fois qu'il était là, il était à LA, et donc ça a ramené, repoussé un des vieux souvenirs. Et là, je me suis dit, en me baladant dans Venise, qu'est-ce qu'il est con cette apparition de tout ça. C'est génial. C'est un endroit qui peut se porter dans le Venise, Gérard, il y avait quelque chose à côté. C'est ce qu'il voulait avoir. Mais en fait, pour lui, c'était une nouvelle conversation. Il n'a pas permis. Et puis, on paye au tarif, j'ai un prix, j'ai une valeur. On ne peut pas travailler au remède. Oui, je suis de ça. Moi aussi, j'ai grandi comme ça aussi. J'ai toujours remarqué que de mon document de ma vie des années 80. Si tu fais le travail et que tu es apprécié, reconnu, respecté, etc., les gens veulent te garder tout. Voilà, en tout cas, à Malte, je pense que ça marche. Pour moi, c'est vrai que il a bien négocié un coup. Quand il est arrivé aux États-Unis, il a très bien négocié. J'ai réussi à garder plus de temps comme ça. Évidemment, c'est raisonnable parce qu'il aurait dû être proactif. Il a été en l'occurrence, mais vraiment, il a pas fait les bons choix.
State Coordinator, Xavier Anglin, our New York City Coordinator, and labor leader in the Hispanic community, political leader, and our New York State Coordinator. Let me introduce William Riley Fernandez.
Good evening, good afternoon. I will try to make this brief because I know everybody's waiting for the man of the hour. Okay? I'm here. I just turned 59 years old. I'm here because it's coming from a place of love. We know, we can see, just look to your left and to your right, we have people, every denomination, culture, and that's why we're here. Specifically, I'm here because I'm a Teamster. And Robert Kennedy is pro-union. Okay? Unfortunately, our president, President Biden, did us wrong with the railroad workers. And that's the reason why I'm here. And Sean O'Brien, the president of the International, made sure to send a message to the Washington in regards to our negotiations that stay away. The Teamster has it. And if not, 340,000 of us were going to go on strike. No one was going to stop us. Now, with that said, we do have a friend in labor with Robert Kennedy Jr., our next president. Absolutely. No further ado, I want to introduce you to Mel Thompson. He's going to be the urban community advisor to RFK Jr. Thank you.
Brooklyn, good evening. Can I hear some noise, please? Hold up. Now, I know Brooklyn, not only because I have it tattooed on my head. I know Brooklyn. And I know Brooklyn can be louder than this. And I don't care if you're from the Bronx, New York City. We have a saying in Brooklyn. It's not where you from, it's where you at. And right now, we're in Brooklyn, New York. So look. When I say, is Brooklyn in the house, I want y'all to make some noise. Is Brooklyn in the house? Now, I just want to make sure we have the right event, right? I just want to make sure we have the right event. I'm going to ask 2 questions. Is anyone here to see Tremel Thompson tonight?
No.
Is anyone here to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tonight? Without further ado, our future president of the United States of America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now let's get some Bobby chants. Bobby, 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 Bobby.
Thank you so much, so many people. I have a friend of mine here, Jay Carson. Can you all hear me? Yes. I have a friend of mine. You know, we started advertising for this event at 10 o'clock yesterday morning. And we think we have 800 people here. My friend Jay Carson, who is here, who was Hillary's press secretary. He worked on the Dean campaign. He worked on the Bradley campaign. And he said that the crowds that we're getting, that he's never seen crowds like this in August or any other candidate except for Bernie and Obama, who won. So I'm very, very grateful for Yesterday morning, I had breakfast with the economist Jeffrey Sachs, and I was talking to him about my experience at the border. And I said that the entire immigration policy of the United States had been hijacked by the Mexican drug cartels. And he said to me, the entire policy of our government has been hijacked by special interests. by this corrupt collusion of state and corporate power that is now strip mining the American middle class, the working people of this country, the working poor, of their wealth, their equity, and all of it, and along the way, subverting our democracy in 1,000 different ways. And the people who are here are seeing that. You know that it's happening. You see it's happening. The press is not being accurate in the way that they report what's happening, but you know in your hearts that there's something wrong with our country and that there's hope now of winning our country back. I'm going to just tell you something logistically. We're going to have a Q&A after I talk, and then we're going to do something where I'm going to take selfies with every one of you that wants one. We have a method for doing that, so I can't sign autographs, I can't have long conversations with you. But we did the other day in Charleston, we did 600 people in 24 minutes. And we have a method down, and if everybody cooperates, it'll be like when you board an airplane from a crowded lounge. That's about how long it was like. We did an opening of our Manchester headquarters a couple of weeks ago, and there was a big crowd there, much bigger than we expected, but I did photographs with everybody afterward, and the last kid in line was a 22-year-old boy. And he said to me that he had never voted before, never participated in politics, but he was getting involved in this campaign. He wanted to work for me because he wanted to have pride in his country, and he wanted to have hope of having a good future for himself. And that same week, and I was looking at this poll on the way over there, here, a poll came out that showed that in 2013, young people between 18 and 30 years old, 85% of them said that they were extremely proud to be American. At the same poll last week showed that only 18% of American young people said they were proud to be American. So something happened in the last 10 years in two administrations, Trump and Biden administration. Something happened to our country that, to me, has yielded one of the most disheartening data points that I have seen since I began running this campaign. This kid said to me, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay off my student debt. My wife, who many of you know, was 35 years old when she finally paid off her student debt. The only reason she was able to do that is because she got her TV show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. She told me if I hadn't gotten that, I'd still be paying it. This kid is paying double what she paid for college and paying 7 times what I paid for college. And he felt very, very hopeless about his future, and he wants to have a home. He felt that that was part of the American promise, and when I was a kid, it was part of the American dream. It was the promise to every American that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you would have enough money to finance a home, that you could have a summer vacation, that you could raise a family, and that you could put something aside for your retirement. Well, today, and that was working one job. And today that is true for very, very few people in this country. And this kid is looking at a situation right now where the price of homes has gone up from $215,000 2 years ago to $400,000 today. And the interest rates of those homes have gone from 2 or 3% to 7%. That home is costing him many, many times what he could have bought it for 2 years ago. And why is it going up? It's going up for one reason, for the reason we have all of this inflation. We've spent $8 trillion on wars at regime change wars that did nothing for our country, that made it more dangerous to be American, both abroad and at home, over the past 20 years, and the politicians did not have the courage to come to us and ask us for permission to tax us to pay for those wars. So the way that they do it is without taxation, without representation. They tax us in a stealth way at the end through inflation. And that's a tax that falls heaviest on the working poor and the middle class and people with fixed incomes and few assets. But the big reason that kid is not living in a house, I have 7 children, and all of them are at the age when normally at my age, we were starting to look for homes. I don't know any of them that had any of their friends that has purchased a home. And every one of us knows kids who are in their 20s who are living with their parents still. We also know stories of people who are about to put a payment down, or about to close on a home, and somebody comes in at the last minute with a cash offer and takes it away from them. And when you look at who is putting that cash offer down, it's some kind of amorphous LLC with an ambiguous name. But if you trace it back to who really owns that LLC, it's very likely it's one of 2, 3 giant corporations: BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. These are companies. BlackRock has $10 trillion under management, and they all own each other. So it's really one big enterprise. They own collectively 88% of the S&P 500. And now they've decided that they want to own all the single-family homes in America. That's not a good thing for our country. Thomas Jefferson said American democracy is dependent on widespread ownership of the land, of tens of thousands of independent homeowners and landowners who each have a stake in our democracy, who are controlling the land base in our country. And the alternative to that is the old feudal aristocracy, where the land base is controlled by a small kleptocracy of billionaires and giant corporations. And that is the reason we fought the American Revolution, to change that system. But now we're going back to it. But these companies have, Larry Fink, who sits on the board of the World Economic Forum, who's the CEO of BlackRock. The World Economic Forum has promised us, in their words, a great reset where we will own nothing but be happy. And part of their plan for making sure we don't own anything is that they're buying up all the houses in this country. So this kid now is competing against BlackRock when he goes out and tries to buy a home. And BlackRock has a much bigger bank book. And so it pays a lot less interest to home, and he simply can't. These kids, our children, cannot compete against those corporations. They have other issues, other bleak future, which is today in the United States of America, the average income is $5,000 less than the average cost of living. The cost of food, transportation, and housing. $5,000 less. How do Americans handle that? They handle it by putting that $5,000 deficit on their credit cards. And the bank and the credit card company are charging them 22% interest. If the mafia did that, they'd call it loan sharking and they'd go to prison. But if the bankers and the credit card companies do it, it's just business as usual. And who do you think owns those credit card companies and those banks? BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So this is, again, how these giant corporations are coming in and strip mining the wealth, the equity from our children. And 57% of Americans can now, more than half of our country, our fellow citizens, to not put their hands on $1,000 if they have an emergency in their family. So these are people who, if they see the engine light go on in their car, it is the apocalypse. It's the end of the world for them. Because they know they can't afford the mechanic. They're going to lose their car. They're going to lose the job because they can't get to work. And then their lives are going to spiral into homelessness and out of control, and people are walking around with that fear. Americans are making choices that I never dreamed Americans would have to make when I was growing up in this country. They're choosing between, this same kid told me that every week he has to make a choice between buying a meal and filling his car up with gas every Tuesday. And now Americans all over our country are making that choice. They're choosing between food and medicine, between food and gasoline. There are young couples who are sitting in an apartment with a baby crying on their laps and having to wonder whether that baby is $50 sick or $100 sick or $1,500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. And you all know what it's like, all of us do, to drive around in a car when the fuel gauge is on empty. When that happens to you, you can't think of anything else. It lowers your IQ because you're totally focused on, am I going to make it to the gas station? Now, also, let's heap on that that maybe you have 2 kids in car seats, toddlers in the back seat. Add that to your anxiety level, and maybe you're driving through a bad neighborhood. And add that to your anxiety level. Well, that is the way that Americans are living every day in this country. I'm running against 2 presidents who both served 1 term, and essentially are gaslighting the American people by telling them that they produced a wave of prosperity for this country. They are running on that record. But I spent a lot of time sitting at kitchen tables with Americans. And I did this long before I was running because I'm representing clients who've been harmed by large corporations, whether it's Monsanto. I'm representing 1,000 families in Columbiana County, Ohio, whose lives were upended by the Norfolk Southern spill. I represent people in West Virginia who've been poisoned by a giant zinc smelter down there, and people all over the country were poisoned by PFOAs, particularly in about 10,000 families in eastern Ohio and West Virginia. And I hear the stories and see that what they're experiencing is not prosperity. What they're experiencing is a level of desperation, of fear, of insecurity, of dispossession, of alienation that is atomizing our people, that is fragmenting, that is contributing to this wave of mental illness across the country. I grew up at a time, and I was lucky enough that's called the economist and social scientist called the Great Prosperity. It was a 50-year period after World War II when the American middle class became the greatest economic generator in the history of mankind. When my uncle was president, we owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. We were the greatest exporter in history up until 1971. Everybody wanted our products. When I traveled with my father in Latin America or Europe, people would offer me money for my blue jeans. People wanted American transistor radios. They wanted RCA Victrolas. They wanted our cars were the gold standard automobiles in the world. Everybody wanted them. I remember when I went to, and it wasn't just that we were producing these products that everybody wanted. People genuinely wanted American leadership all over the world. They knew the difference between leadership and bullying. And they wanted our leadership. They believed in the moral authority of our country. I went in 1964, the year after my uncle was killed. I went on a trip to Poland with my father and 3 of my siblings. And at that time, Poland was a communist government, and they did not want us there. We went at the end, my father received an invitation from a human rights organization, and we went there and visited them, and the Polish government blacked out any mention of our presence in the country in all the newspapers, so the public didn't know we were there. And in fact, before we went to Poland, my mother took us shopping in Washington, D.C., the 3 older kids, to buy presents for children in a Warsaw orphanage that we were going to go visit. And we were very happy to bring all these presents to the kids and excited about it. But when we got to that orphanage, the Polish government had removed all the children so that they wouldn't have any contact with our family. 2 days later, we went to Krakow, and we went to visit the Cathedral of Black Maria. And we were going to visit the cardinal, who was a living saint. He had stood up to the communists, he'd been tortured, he had been jailed. His piety, his dignity, his quiet, peaceful presence had inspired a huge religious resurgence in the Catholic Church in Poland. And for us, the Catholic family, it was an enormous thrill to be able to go to meet somebody who was a living saint, who we knew after he died, he was going to be beatified by the Catholic Church, which he was. And I'll tell you just a little story that's kind of a digression. While we were waiting to see the cardinal, he was sick, and he had to prepare himself for our visit. We were brought into the kitchen by a young priest who was one of his attendants, and that priest spoke very good English. And he made us chicken sandwiches, and then he wanted to talk to us mainly about skiing. He loved skiing, and he wanted to talk about all the American ski areas. He'd never skied in our country. But 40 years later, that priest became Pope John Paul II. And so yeah, the Pope made chicken sandwiches for me. But when we visited the cardinal for 2 hours, and then we were a total of about 4 hours in the sacristy, in the rectory, and in the cathedral. And when we came into the cathedral, Krakow Square, which is this enormous square, it looks like it's a mile long, was completely empty of people. Nobody knew that we were there. But when we came out 4 hours later, there were 1 million people waiting for us. And the word had spread by word of mouth of our presence there, and the entire city had emptied out to come and greet us. They surrounded our car. My father pulled us all up on the roof of the embassy limousine, and he gave a speech, and then for over 2 hours they sang to us so loud. They sang the Polish national anthem, which at that time was a criminal act. You weren't allowed to sing it. And they sang it again and again and again to us. And I saw this electricity in the crowd with tears coming down people's faces and the love they had in the United States of America. I saw the same thing on that trip in Greece, in Italy, in France, in Germany, and Britain. Huge crowds of people coming out because they loved our country. That was good for our national security. It was good for our economy. It was good for the stability of the world. And one of the reasons for that was because our country, particularly in my uncle's administration, had avoided going to war. My uncle said we should never negotiate that year. Negotiate, and he understood that diplomacy should lead. That diplomacy should lead, and 3 days before my uncle was inaugurated, and I was at his inauguration, Dwight Eisenhower, the outgoing president, gave his speech on my birthday, actually, January 17th, 1961. Which today, looking back, should be regarded as the most important speech in American history. It was a speech where he warned Americans against the emergence and the domination by a military-industrial complex that would turn us into an imperium abroad and national security state, a garrison state, a surveillance state at home. And he said that we could not be both a democracy, an imperium abroad, and a democracy at home, which our founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, also recognized. My uncle came to office 3 days later, and 4 months later, he faced down the military-industrial complex during the Bay of Pigs. And he said during the Bay of Pigs, he was lied to by the CIA. He took public blame for it, but to his aides, he said, "I'm going to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, and scatter it to the winds." The next 1,000 days of his administration pitted him in a constant battle against his military brass and his intelligence apparatus to keep the country out of war. He told his best friend, Ben Bradley, one of his two best friends, the editor of the Washington Post, he said, Ben Bradley asked him, "What do you want on your gravestone?" My uncle told him, "He kept the peace. That's what I wanted my epitaph." He said, "The primary job of a president of the United States is to keep the country out of war." And he succeeded in doing that. He refused to go into Laos. Is Daniel Ellsberg, who was the Rand Corporation and in the Pentagon at that time, said that when he didn't go into Laos, there was a coup d'etat atmosphere in the Pentagon, calling him a traitor to the United States. He refused to go into Berlin in 1961 at the Checkpoint Charlie confrontation. He refused to go into Cuba in 61 and at the Bay of Pigs, 62 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he refused to send combat troops to Vietnam. All of his military advisors, without exception, including people he deeply trusted and loved, Avo Harriman and Maxwell Taylor and Douglas Dillon and many others, all told him, "You've got to send 250,000 troops to Vietnam or the government is going to collapse." He said to them, "It's their government. They need to fight. We cannot win their war. We cannot fight their wars for them." He ended up sending 16,000 military advisors, mainly Green Berets. They technically were not allowed to participate in combat. Some of them did anyway, and he learned on October 22nd, 1963, that a Green Beret had been killed in Vietnam. And he asked Paul Roscoe, one of his aides, for a casualty list. And Roscoe came back and showed him 75 American troops had been killed. And he said, "That's enough, that's too many." And that afternoon, he issued National Security Order 263, ordering all U.S. military personnel out of Vietnam by the end of 1965, with the first 1,000 coming home in December 63, so a month later. 1 month after that, he was murdered. And a week after that, President Johnson remanded National Security Order 263, and within a year, he had sent 265,000 troops to Vietnam. And then, my father ran against that war, ran against the military-industrial complex, was killed in the process. Martin Luther King was killed 2 months before. My uncle, on his own quest for peace, he had become a peace activist, broken with many of the other leaders of the civil rights movement, because he said, we cannot have this war brought. We have to choose between the war of poverty at home and the war in Vietnam abroad. We cannot do both. And the violence and mayhem we are creating over there is going to come home. And the oppression and the totalitarian features of that war will come home. We have to choose between them. He was killed. My uncle was killed, and my father was killed. And these traumas, my uncle's death, my father's death, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the Vietnam War itself, 9/11, and ultimately the COVID crisis. These series of traumas, all of them played this role in pushing us farther and farther down the road that Eisenhower warned us against, the military-industrial complex. And now, over the past 20 years, we spent $8 trillion on useless wars, and we're now in another one in Ukraine that could have easily been avoided, that could have easily been settled, that should have been. My son fought in that war because of his sympathy and admiration for the valor of the Ukrainian people, but it's clear today to many, many increasing number of Americans that we are not there to do a favor for the Ukrainian people. There are 400,000 of their kids have now died, perished in that war. And each one of those kids has a mother. And the United States government is not telling us the truth about it. The Ukrainian government is not telling their people the truth about it. And it's time that we have some leadership, and hopefully at some point the American press will actually we committed in March $113 billion for that war. The entire budget for EPA is $12 billion. That's what we have for the environment in this country. The entire budget for CDC is $12 billion. We're sending 10 times that to Ukraine. We have a crisis in this country of poverty, of desperation, of environmental degradation. And we don't have money. The same month, in March, that we made that up the commitment to $113 billion, the federal government cut food stamps to 30 million Americans, from $283 to $23, 90% cuts. We told 15 million Americans they were being cut from Medicare. But and that same month, the Fed printed $300 billion unanticipated to pay for the bailout of the Silicon Valley Bank. So, Mitch McConnell, and now President Biden is back in the Senate asking for another $24 billion, and it's never ended. And Mitch McConnell, when he was asked, do we really have enough money to pay for this war? He said, well, don't worry, the money is not really going to Ukraine. It's going to U.S. military contractors. So we acknowledge it's a money laundering scheme. Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, Lockheed, and all the other ones. And who do you think owns virtually every one of those companies? BlackRock. Exactly. So this is how they're strip mining our wealth. And I'm just going to tell you one quick anecdote that doesn't affect your lives directly, but I'm campaigning in Iowa, so I've been following this issue out there. They're building a 3,300-mile pipeline. Now, you guys all know that my primary job for 40 years has been in environmental, one of the leading environmental lawyers and activists. I want to see the environment protected. Carbon capture, which is the primary focus of President Biden's environmental climate program, is a boondoggle. It is a flim-flam. It is actually, it's a way of funneling subsidies to the carbon industry. And here's what's happening. I'm going to tell you very briefly. There's 3,300 miles of 3 giant pipelines that are supposed to pick up CO2 from the ethanol plants in Iowa and then cross 6 states and bury that in deep injection wells where it will remain in the geology forever, which, by the way, does not work. We've seen it again and again fail, and many people get injured because it leaks out. They have to condemn 3,300 miles of farmland, the richest farmland in America. So they're condemning the farmers. The farmers hate it. 80% of the people in Iowa don't want it to happen. 46 counties through which it's running are protesting. There's just a tiny handful of people in Iowa who want it, and they're politicians who've accepted $1.6 million from the primary promoter. And you know what the value of that pipeline is, because the promoters are paid by the gallon for every gallon of carbon that they transfer. The value is $173 billion, higher than the Ukraine war. And what they're really doing, because North Dakota has now said, we will not issue a permit to bury it here. So it's now become clear that it's not an accident that the terminus of the pipeline is the Bakken crude oil field. Because every one of these pipelines that have been built in the past are not used to actually bury the carbon. They're used to do high pressure injection into expired oil wells to get the last oil out of those wells and extend the fields for another 10 or 20 years. No, they're doing the opposite of protecting us from carbon emissions, and virtually all of the politicians in the state who are supporting this are politicians who say they don't believe in climate change. Why are they supporting a $173 billion project that supposedly is supposed to reduce the risk of climate change? Because of the money. And who do you think owns the biggest one of those pipelines? So these are all ways that they're strip mining us. I want to say, I painted a depressing picture for you. I wanted to leave you with some hope. I've spent my entire lifetime fighting these same corporations. I've brought over 500 lawsuits. That successful lawsuits. The biggest corporations in our country, the Monsanto lawsuit, people told us time and time again, you'll never win that lawsuit. And we ultimately settled it for about $13 billion, and Roundup is now is on the way to be, it's already being withdrawn from some of the most ubiquitous uses in home gardening, and it will soon be withdrawn from others. But Mobil, all of the big Exxon, all the big corporations, I've litigated against almost all of the regulatory agencies. I know how to unravel corporate capture. And I'm going to tell you one thing that I'm going to do as soon as I get into office. I'm going to, first of all, offer legislation to change the tax code to make it much less profitable for BlackRock and these other entities, large corporations, to buy millions of single-family homes, because we cannot afford to have them competing against our children. And then I'm going to immediately create a class of mortgages for single-home buyers, first-time buyers, at 3% interest. I'm going to do that without raising the deficit. I'm going to drop this deficit. I'm going to unravel the empire abroad, and I'm going to bring that money home and invest it in America. I start by launching a housing boom in this country. The great prosperity that I talked about was started with a housing boom after World War II that let thousands of millions of returning soldiers buy a home at very, very low interest rates. It got every American to a home. And I'm going to do that by this. You know that if you have a rich uncle and he agrees to co-sign your mortgage, and you can get a much better rate because the bank is basing that mortgage not on your lousy credit rating, but on your rich uncle's credit rating, which is much lower. So I'm going to give every American a rich uncle. Is called Uncle Sam. He's going to co-sign your mortgage and guarantee it at 3%, which will reduce the average mortgage in this country by $1,000 a month and allow our children to compete against BlackRock. And I'm going to do it without raising the deficit by selling tax-free bonds at 3%, which will be purchased in the marketplace to pay for these mortgages. And the first 500,000 of them we're going to give just to teachers. And in order, because our teachers are abused and neglected, and we need to start giving them something. We need to start recognizing that they are performing the most important job in America. And we're going to give these mortgages to first-time home buyers who agree to live in those communities and to work in those communities, beginning with the teachers. So I want to just leave you with this thought. We have an amazing crowd here. There's no other candidate who's running, with the exception probably of Donald Trump, who is speaking to crowds this size. Hell yeah! And my father ran for president. Everybody said he couldn't run, and he in fact didn't believe he could run because he was running against the entire infrastructure, power infrastructure of our country. He was running against a Democratic president of his own party, like I am. He was running against the war machine, like I am. He was opposed by the big city mayors who had supported him in 1960. He was opposed by the labor unions who were all embedded in the DNC. He was opposed by the New York Times, by the Village Voice, by all the liberal media, as am I. But I even have a bigger uphill. And my father ended up winning California, and I believe that he would have won the election. I'm running against perhaps an even larger challenge, because I'm running against the entire infrastructure, including the intelligence agencies, including big agriculture, including the big pharmaceutical companies and the medical cartels. And including the media, who is either aligned with the DNC or largely dependent on pharmaceutical advertising. And they know that day one, I am signing an executive order banning pharmaceutical advertising. They will never support me. They're always going to be aligned against me because I'm going to cost them money. The only thing that I have is this support, is you, is people. I need you to do everything that you can over the next 2 months. To go on our website, contribute if you can, make sure that we have your email, call your friends, ask them to do it, sign up as volunteers. We already have 160,000 volunteers all over this country. We can do this fast. I need your help, and I need you to get out, and this is our chance to take back our country, all the values that put the people of the United States back in charge of the United States of America. Thank you all very much.
Bobby. Now look, this is what I need everyone to do. I need everyone to go to Kennedy24.com, right? Now I need y'all to donate to the campaign. If anyone show me that they donated $3,300 today, I'm gonna let y'all skip the line and get a picture with Bobby. But everyone in this room is stakeholders in this campaign. We need to get this man elected. He is the change that we all want to see. We are America strong. And guess what? Bobby is not only my friend, he's America's friend. And we're going to make sure we get him elected. Let's go! So this is what we're going to do right now. You going to do it, Steph? We're going to do questions, and y'all going to ask Mr. Kennedy some questions. We only have time for like 10. Oh, you can't run it like that. This is Brooklyn, I understand. This is Brooklyn. You can't run it like that.
Stop these entities, government entities, with these internal investigations, where there's blatant facts of malfeasance. I am the second longest wrongful conviction person in the state of New York.
All right, we're gonna bring somebody from the campaign to come speak to you personally. We're gonna listen to what you have to say. This campaign is all about listening to the American people, and we're gonna make sure we get that done. I guess you guys can come up to the front right here and get 10 people.
Question. Keep your hand up. Okay. Hello.
Well, the gentleman who needed some attention, will you go to the corner there, and we'll send somebody over to talk to you and figure out what we can do for you.
We're gonna, if you have a question, keep your hand up. And if, okay.
Thank you for coming here. You've mentioned an interest in securing our southern borders, is that correct? What are you planning on doing with the migrants that are already here?
The question is, what do we plan to do with the migrants who are already here? We need, before we figure out, the migrants are already here. This is a huge, heartbreaking humanitarian crisis. And because I watched them come over the border, I watched in a 2-hour period, 300 people come over the border. Almost none of them were from, only 2 of the families I watched that night between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning were from Latin America. Most of them, about half of them were from Africa. The other half were mainly from Asia, from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tibet, China, India. They did not have I talked to every family. And none of them, only 2 families had asylum claims. The rest of them said, we're here because we want to work. They had been stripped of their wealth by the cartels. They had been exploited, extorted. Some of them had been raped. They had been robbed. They had been beaten. A Peruvian family had their entire life savings robbed. The cartels were advertising on TikTok and YouTube all over the world, telling people that they can get them in for $10,000. The people get to the border, they come across the Border Patrol, who are absolutely disheartened and depressed. 9 of them have committed suicide over the last year, according to what they told us. Bring them to the airport, put them on an airplane, and get them a ticket to any destination in our country. 100,000 have come here to New York City. These are people who have no legal status. They are being exploited by unscrupulous employers. They're being paid $5 or $6 an hour, which is not enough to live in. They're living on our sidewalks, and as most of you know, Eric Adams, the mayor, out of desperation, is putting these now on Randall's Island. We have kids in this city who were deprived of their ability to play sports for 3 years.
Yep.
Some of them would be on sports scholarships.
Yep.
So they had the tremendous advantages taken away from them.
Absolutely.
And now they can't play on the sporting fields because they're being occupied by migrants. We cannot solve that problem until we seal the border, because we cannot go back and what we need in this country is a secure border and then wide open gates and allow people to come in legally and have a fast path to citizenship. We need their help. We need their contribution to our society. But we can't do that until we assure the American people that the border is secure and that we are controlling it and not the Mexican drug cartel.
Okay, so a predecessor before always talked about Joe the plumber. I'm Yolanda the podiatrist, and I have to be non-par just to stay alive. And you talked about not being in the pockets of big pharma. What about the big insurance companies? I have to be non-par just so that, not participate in insurance companies, just so that I can stay afloat, so that I can pay my employees, so that I can run the practice, and so that I can give quality health care. And I find that all these politicians are deep in the pockets of these big insurance companies. They have the lobbyists. What are you going to do for the doctors so that the doctors can actually give quality health care and not have factories or practices, so that we can actually provide quality health care? What are you going to do about that?
Well, the insurance companies are part of this giant medical cartel that is driven by corruption, driven by, and I could tell you stories all day about my encounters with the insurance industry and how corrupt they are and how little interested they are in actually making Americans healthier, which shocked me. Because I thought, well, they're an insurance company, the sicker we are, the more they have to pay out. But one of them, the executives, actually explained it to me. He said, because I was talking to him about the chronic disease epidemic and the actual exposures that we can make Americans healthier. The chronic disease is the biggest cause of medicine in the United States. 80% of the $4.3 trillion we spend on medicine is chronic disease. And I thought the one industry that may want to have us be healthier, because pharma loves us sick, but I thought that insurance companies should want us well because it will cost them less. And this insurance executive said to me, he said, if you're Lloyd's of London, do you think it's a better thing for you if there's one shipwreck a year or if there's 500 shipwrecks a year? And I said, one. And he said, no. It's better for you if there's 500 because then everybody pays more and the pie gets bigger and they're living off the friction of the pie. We have an entire medical cartel and the insurance industry is part of it that are ravaging our population and not providing us the service they're supposed to. And my promise to you is that I'm going to clean up that corruption.
Testing.
What about
The
Hawaii?
number one reason for inflation is the Federal Reserve printing more money in thin air. If you're elected, will you abolish the Federal Reserve and put us back in the gold standard so our money actually has value?
I'm not going to abolish the Fed because that cannot be done overnight. And the Fed, you know, my uncle did, which my uncle saw what the Fed was doing, and the impacts. The Fed was originally created as the lender of last resort, which has a value when you run into economic problems. But of course, the Fed immediately became captured by the central banks. And now there's a manipulation cycle where they print a lot of money and do what they call quantitative easing, which sucks the American public into borrowing heavily. And they raise the interest rates to 7%, and people lose their equities. And allows the big actors like BlackRock to swoop in and steal all their assets. And Americans are being systematically stripped of assets by the Fed. The Fed and the Fed policies inextricably move wealth upward, and they're creating a society that is now where there's huge wealth above and widespread poverty below. My uncle saw it, and that is a configuration that cannot support democracy over the long term. And that is what the action the Fed does. What we need to do, which I will do, I'm not going to promise to abolish the Fed. I wish I could do that. You can't do that overnight.
Created overnight.
Yeah, but now the entire world economic system is dependent on it. And is inextricably linked to it. What I'm going to do a couple things. One of the things that my uncle did, which is a few months before his death, he recognized that fiat currency was the currency of war. Fiat currency was created to wage war. And it was shifting wealth upward. And he created the silver certificate and the gold certificate, so that there would be at least some base currency available to the American people that would inject discipline into the market to curtail at least this practice of just printing as much money with no impact. I'm going to issue a series of treasury notes that are rooted in base currency, including Bitcoin, silver, gold, platinum, and other base currencies, at least partially, so that Americans will have an option of buying T-bills and of borrowing and of attaining assets that are rooted in base currency, so that they're more of a hedge against inflation. And that will inject discipline into the market. But we need a lot more than that. We need to stop printing money, and that means initially we need to wind down the empire abroad. We have 800 bases abroad. China has 1.5. And each one of those bases is an opportunity for new wars and new spending. And we have an intelligence apparatus and a military apparatus that their function now, as my uncle recognized, is simply to provide the military-industrial complex with a constant pipeline of new wars that we end up paying for.
Mr. Kennedy. Two quick points. You mentioned about the real estate prices. I just want to let you know, in Queens and Brooklyn, it's about $575,000. In Nassau County, it's close to $625,000.
Scott, it's okay.
All right, and then the other part is in Suffolk, it's just a little bit less. So when you mentioned about the 3%, that's amazing. If we could do that for folks. And the other quick thing I wanted to tell you is, and I hope this is not out of line, I drove 2.5 hours to meet you tonight and get your autograph. Your mom signed for me in the past, as did Rory, your cousin. So I would be honored if you would please sign this to my collection. Thank you. Next question.
Hello.
We have a question over here.
Hi again, Mr. Kennedy. It's wonderful to see you again. You were addressing the topic of Ukraine and how that will eventually lead to nuclear war if it continues escalating. Life had changed after the bomb had been dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The dropping of the bomb was targeted against the American population, and we were convinced to authorize a permanent security apparatus. Fear has reigned in the UN since then, with one exception: what your uncle proposed to the USSR in American University. But there's a second speech he gave that gives us a policy for right now, and that's his speech at the UN General Assembly on September 20th. We should offer to Russia and China right now what your uncle offered in 1963. That is the way out of Ukraine, out of Taiwan. India spent about $50 million on their moon mission. So for $1 billion, the Indians could do 20 lunar probes, according to their budget. That's less than 1% of what we gave to Ukraine already. So I would like you to talk about that speech that Kennedy gave when he proposed the US-USSR joint mission to the moon and how we could use that again.
First of all, if I get into office, I'm going to negotiate a settlement immediately to the Ukraine war. I'm going to stop the saber rattling with China. China does want to bury us. They want to dominate the globe. They are our economic adversary. But they don't want a war with us. They don't want a hot war. They want an economic war. And our country now spends $1.3 trillion a year on our military, including veterans benefits and our national security apparatus. The Chinese, and we spend $990 billion just on the military. The Chinese we spend more than the top 10 nations combined. The Chinese spend a third of what we have. They have one base abroad, we have 800. They do not want a war with us. They want an economic competition, and they're winning that right now because we are projecting military power abroad rather than economic power. My uncle wanted to project economic power, and that's why he got his popularity around the world. Over the last 8 years, we spent $8 trillion bombing ports, bridges, schools, hospitals, roads, and houses. During that same period, China spent $8 trillion, the exact same amount, building ports, roads, schools, bridges, and hospitals. And guess what? Because of that, China is now the #1 creditor in virtually every nation in Latin America and almost all the nations in Africa. China is leading BRICS, which BRICS was only created because of the Ukraine war, because we militarized and weaponized our status as the world's reserve currency. And it's not helping us. The worst part of the outcomes of that war are not only that we've made ourselves risking nuclear exchange with a country, Russia, that has 1,000 more nuclear weapons than we do and much better weapons than we do. Weapons that actually can shoot down other weapons, which is very doubtful ours can. We're tangling with the Russians. We have their backs to the wall, and we're toying with Armageddon, but also we've pushed Russia now into a loving embrace with China, which is the worst possible foreign policy outcome that we could imagine. And we've created BRICS, which is competing with the US dollar, and now has 11 nations, controls 47% of the world's population, 30% of GDP, and it's clear that it will now control about 90% of oil production because the major players, Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia, are all members of BRICS. So we are digging our own grave with the Ukraine war, and we need to get out of that war, and we need to compete with China. My uncle wanted to compete using economically around the globe. He said, I don't want an African child or a Latin American child when they hear the name United States of America to think of a man with a gun and a military uniform. I want them to think of a Peace Corps volunteer, the Alliance for Progress, USAID, which was then a good organization, and the Kennedy Milk Program. And because of that, today, there are more statues to my uncle, there are more boulevards named after him, more hospitals, universities, avenues and streets in every capital in Africa, Latin America, and any other nation. And that's good for our national security, and it's good for global stability.
Okay, we have one more question. Excuse me.
We want to know, since you're the candidate for against vaccines, will you help the Medical Freedom Party? We also have our...
Okay, excuse me, we have one question, and then believe it or not, when we're done, we're going to do selfies with anyone that wants one. Okay.
Hello, my name is Renee Mitchell. I'm one of the board of directors for the National Coalition for Homeless. I deal with homeless in 50 states. I'm also the executive director of Breaking the Cycle Drop Court, which is my own nonprofit. What I want to ask you, because the homeless shelter is getting $5,000 for each individual, which is profit over human lives, warehousing. The migrants, they get like $10,000 a day. So I want to know, if you become our next president, will you do federal oversight on how this money is being distributed to local cities, states, and governments, because the people are not getting the resources?
My answer to that is yes, I will. And I want Stephanie to get your name and address, or Jamel to get your name and address. All right. Well, I'm going to invite you to the White House and you and I are going to talk about it. All right, I'm going to thank all of you, and I guess where are we going to wind up start? All right, we're going to move some of these gates around, and then everybody's going to get a chance to take a picture.
We have a state-based website. If you'd like to learn, if you're a Republican or Independent, want to learn how to change your registration for the Democratic presidential primary, we're going to be doing a group photo right now. If you want to write up.
Go, Bobby!